The gaze in strategy. The gaze should be large and broad. This is the twofold gaze, perception and sight. Perception is strong and sight weak. Spiritual bearing in strategy. In strategy, it is important to see distant things as if they were close and to take a distance view of close things. It is important in strategy to know the enemy's sword and not to be distracted by insignificant movements of his sword. You must study this. The gaze is the same for single combat and for large-scale strategy. It is necessary in strategy to be able to look at both sides without moving the eyeballs. You cannot master this ability quickly. Learn what is written here, use this gaze in everyday life, and do not vary in whatever happens. Holding the sword. Grip the long sword with a rather floating feeling in your thumb and forefinger, with the middle finger neither tight nor slack, and with the last two fingers tight. It is bad to have play in your hands. When you take up a sword, you must feel intent on cutting the enemy. As you cut an enemy, you must not change your grip, and your hands must not cower. When you dash the enemy's sword aside, or ward it off, or force it down, you must slightly change the feeling in your thumb and forefinger. Above all, you must be intent on cutting the enemy in the way you grip the sword. The grip for combat and for the sword testing is the same. There is no such thing as a cutting grip. Generally, I dislike the fixedness in both long swords and hands. Fixedness means a dead hand. Pliability is a living hand. You must bear this in mind. Footwork. With the tips of your toes somewhat floating, tread firmly with your heels. Whether you move fast or slow, with large or small steps, your feet must always move as in normal walking. I dislike the three walking methods known as jumping foot, floating foot, and fixed steps. So-called yin-yang foot is important in the way. Yin-yang foot means not moving only one foot. It means moving your feet left, right, and right, left, then cutting, when cutting, withdrawing, and warding off a cut. You should not move on one foot preferentially. The 5 attitudes. The 5 attitudes are upper, middle, lower, right side, left, and left side. These are the give. Although attitude has these 5 divisions, the one purpose of all of them is to cut the enemy. There are none but these 5 attitudes. Whatever attitude you're in, do not be conscious of making the attitude. Think only of cutting. Your attitude should be large or small according to the situation. Upper, lower, and middle attitudes are decisive. Left side and right side attitudes are fluid. Left and right attitudes should be used if there is an obstruction overhead or to one side. The decision to use left or right depends on the place. The essence of the way is this: to understand attitude, you must thoroughly understand the middle attitude. The middle attitude is the heart of attitudes. If we look at strategy on a broad scale, the middle attitude is the seat of the commander, with the other four attitudes following the commander. You must appreciate this. Knowing the way of the long sword means we can wield with 2 fingers the sword we usually carry. If we know the path of the sword well, we can wield it easily. If you try to wield a long sword quickly, you will mistake the way. To wield the long sword well, you must wield it calmly. If you try to wield it quickly, like a folding fan or a short sword, you will err by using short sword chopping. You cannot cut down a man with a long sword using this method. When you have cut downwards with the long sword, lift it straight upwards. When you are cutting sideways, return the sword along the sideways path. Return the sword in a reasonable way, always stretching the elbows broadly. Wield the sword strongly. This is the way of the long sword. If you learn to use the 5 approaches of my strategy, you will be able to wield a sword well. You must train constantly. The 5 approaches. The first approach is the middle attitude. Confront the enemy with the point of your sword against his face. When he attacks, dash his sword to the right and ride it. Or, when the enemy attacks, deflect the point of his sword by hitting downwards. Keep your sword where it is, and as the enemy renews his attack, cut his arm from below. This is the first method. The 5 approaches are this kind of thing. You must train repeatedly using the longsword in order to learn them. You will master my way of the longsword. You will be able to control any attack the enemy makes. I assure you, there is no attitude other than the 5 attitudes of the longsword of Nito. Number 2. In the second approach with the longsword, from the upper attitude, cut the enemy just as he attacks. If the enemy evades the cut, keep your sword where it is and scoop up from below. Cut him as he renews the attack. It is possible to repeat the cut from here. In this method, there are various changes in timing and spirit. You will be able to understand this by training in the Ichi school. You will also win with the 5 long sword methods. You must train repetitively. Number 3. In the third approach, adopt the lower attitude, anticipating scooping up. When the enemy attacks, hit his hands from below. As you do so, he may try to hit your sword down. If this is the case, cut his upper arm horizontally with a feeling of crossing. This means that from the lower attitude you hit the enemy at the instant he attacks. You will encounter this method often, both as a beginner and in later strategy. You must train holding a long sword. Number 4. In this fourth approach, adopt the left side attitude. As the enemy attacks, hit his hands from below. If you hit his hands, he attempts to dash down your sword. With the feeling of hitting his hands, parry the path of his long sword and cut across from above your shoulder. This is the way of the long sword. Through this method, you win by parrying the line of the enemy's attack. You must research this. Number 5. In the fifth approach, the sword is in the right side attitude in accordance with the enemy's attack. Cross your long sword from below at the side to the upper attitude, then cut straight from above. This method is essential for knowing the way of the long sword well. If you can use this method, you can freely wield a heavy long sword. I cannot describe in detail how to use these 5 approaches. You must be well acquainted with in harmony with the longsword way. Learn large scale timing, understand the enemy's longsword, and become used to the 5 approaches from the onset. You will always win by using these 5 methods. With various timing considerations, discern the enemy's spirit. You must consider all this carefully.